Hey, everybody, welcome to the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha, Guillaume, and Emina Poricanin. We have a special guest with us today, and Emina will do the introductions as usual. Emina.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We have Johnny Flanagan joining us today in our podcast studio. And Johnny is a personal assistant, longtime personal assistant in the Consumer Direct program. And we're going to chat today about how things have been with the transition in New York State under the single fiscal intermediary. We have been talking about that for months now on this podcast. There are open chats and forums every day that talk about the issues that consumers and PAs still continue to experience with this transition. Johnny's going to talk a little bit more about that from her standpoint as well as other topics. So we're so thrilled she was able to find time in her busy schedule to join us because as she'll share, she works quite a lot of hours to service her consumer. Johnny, thanks again for joining us.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
So tell us how long you've been a personal assistant.
With this particular client for about 7 years, he's more of a family member to me than a client. I've known him through family members. He is the brother to my uncle's ex-wife. So I've known him pretty much all my life. And although I never knew growing up that he was sick with MS, I just knew he had medical problems. And so a little bit before COVID came around, I found him in a position in the CDPAP program, and things were really scattered and out of place for him. And he was signed up with New York State's former FIs, specifically Angels in Your Home in Rochester, New York. And when I came into the situation, he's a 24-hour-a-day case because of his diagnosis. And he didn't even have anybody there, and so it was really hard at first because I wasn't even familiar with CDPAP and I didn't really have any guidance from anyone. And so I kind of had to figure out things for myself. So after multiple attempts of trying to get a hold of the people at Angels in Your Home so that I could get myself signed up to be on his payroll as an aide, and we could never get a hold of them. Ultimately, I ended up figuring out that I could change FIs that he was with. And so we switched around a couple times to a different FIs until we found one that worked for us, which was Aaliyah Home Care. And they were a great agency and they did everything that they could to help us before the transition to PPL came along, which completely upended his whole life and situation. And, but day by day, we're trying to figure out how to work through it.
So you're clearly upstate. There are obviously some major differences between doing CDPAP upstate and downstate. But as far as the scheduling, are you able to share if your consumer has overtime? It sounds like he does, but I just want to confirm before going.
Oh, we have we definitely have overtime. He's 168 hours, so it's 24-hour daycare. And we've always been able to work the overtime no problem prior to this transition. But since we've switched, there's been a lot of misinformation. We on a weekly basis, get messages that say that we're exceeding our overtime hours and that apparently my client's in danger because of that, even though in the offer letter it said that they paid overtime. And, but those are the messages that we receive every week. I've spoken with representatives from PPL that say that those messages don't apply, but, it's really confusing when they're sending out these messages and they don't specifically apply to you.
And is just to confirm, is it a split shift or is it a live-in situation?
No, it is a split shift.
Okay.
like a live-in situation. Just, New York State standards, they think that it would be okay to have somebody there for a 24-hour shift, but they only want to pay you like 12 or 13 hours out of the day. And it's not really conducive for him, and his needs specifically. He needs like a fresh face every few hours so that a person doesn't get burned out staying there for 24-hour shifts. And that would be a really overwhelming situation, I think, to just be with somebody consecutively for that period of time.
Have you or you and he and the family been able to find caregivers, just adequate number of staff, being from
Well,
Western New York?
throughout the years, it's been a little difficult, especially around the time of COVID. There really was like no assistance during COVID. Other places that we've dealt with in the past, FIs, they offered like a list of people that would be able to be his aide or whatever. But a lot of those people never worked out, quite frankly. It's difficult being in the CDPAP program for
Mhm.
him with his condition.
And is the
He has
case
a
stable right now? Sorry,
Oh
I
yeah,
jumped
we're
in
stable
early.
right now. And
Okay.
we definitely have a full deck of people and his hours are fulfilled. But one problem that we do seem to run across with PPL is they dock people or short people hours or their proper wage. You know what I mean? And I'm in tune with everybody that works with my cousin, and so I've signed everybody up. I've tried to help everybody through the process. So I have access to see everybody's pay stubs, etc. And there's been some questionable pay periods where people didn't get paid appropriately and such. And then you have to like pull teeth to get it fixed. You know, uh, PPL doesn't seem to have a payroll department, an authorization department, any type of department, a supervisor, anybody that could help you resolve the problem when you call them. And they always say that, oh, we're escalating a ticket and somebody will get back to you. And quite frankly, by the time they get back to me, I've already figured it out. And they don't even know why I'm calling. And I don't even know why they're calling. And it just turns into an unorganized mess. But more than likely, I've figured it out. I've been able to study the portal thoroughly. And so I kind of have a good idea of how to move through it now versus the beginning. It was really difficult in the beginning.
It's a great resource that you are to him. It seems because others are complaining about navigating the
Oh,
communication with.
I help as many people as I can. Like specifically, like I told you, we live in Rochester, New York, and he lives in like a subsidized housing for disabled people through HUD, right? And so the whole entire building is people that are in the CDPAP program and had to enroll with PPL. And so a lot of those people didn't know anything. They didn't know anything. That they didn't even know they had a portal that they had to log into to approve timesheets. And I specifically helped several different people after like a month of not being paid. I helped their consumer and them figure out what the issue was so that they were able to ultimately collect their paycheck, which seemed like it got triple taxed when they finally received it.
Is your main point of contact at PPL your coordinator or scheduling person, or are you
There,
not speaking
there's
with?
There is no main point of contact. We have no main point of contact. No one has contacted us to say that like they're his case manager or anything like that. There's been no point of contact. Like this company is very poorly put together. And quite frankly, if I have to give my opinion about it, I would say from appearance, it looks like every state they've been in, they've had the same problems. Nothing ever seemed to be resolved. Their contract was canceled or suspended, and then they moved on to the next state. And, Kathy Hochul specifically was complaining that, this program was riddled with fraud, waste, and abuse. But in fact, I feel like it's worse off now than it was before. I mean, I'm online in many different groups on Facebook, and I see what people look all across New York State are saying. And there's people that, haven't gotten paid, don't have a clear, informative idea of how this program is running and what you need to be doing. And there's just several things. You can't get a hold of anybody there. Like I said, I could call them today, tell them that there's a situation, and it could be anything: payroll, the app's not working, maybe I'm trying to get somebody new signed up, anybody, whoever I'm speaking with, they don't seem to know what's going on. And
Can
then they'll
you,
tell you that
Johnny, I'm
they,
sorry to interrupt, but actually you said a lot there, and I just want to unpack it a little bit before we go
okay,
further. Can you tell us specifically about the problems that you've had? Just pick one and then go into a little bit more detail. For example, the clock in and clock out not working. Like, what kind of issues have you had with the EVV system that PPL is
well,
utilizing?
initially,
Mm-hmm.
when we first signed up, or when
Mm-hmm.
the authorization first went through,
Mm-hmm.
which they said was supposed to be there on the 1st of April, and it wasn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, when it did kick in, we weren't able to clock in by app. So they told us to clock in by telephone, which we were doing. So for like the first 2 weeks, we're clocking in by telephone, but there were several instances where, say, I had already clocked out for my shift for the day. Say I work 7 in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I
Mm-hmm.
leave and I clock out. But
Mm-hmm.
then I come back at nighttime to do the overnight shift, and I'm there, say, at 10:30 in the evening, right? I clock in at 10:30 in the evening. I go to clock out at 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and it'll say that I was never clocked in.
Mm-hmm.
Or it will say something like I was clocked in for multiple days, probably like 48 hours, something like that. And then when I try to go back and correct it, it won't allow me to, you see. And then when I go into the PPL app and I go to look for my shift disappears, or it says that it's pended, because there was overlapping or something to that effect. And
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't an overlap, That's another thing. There was never a clear explanation to clocking in and clocking out. No one from PPL or the Department of Health or any program or video or anything that they put up said that, oh, you need to clock out by, say, 6:59, because if you clock it out at 7:02 and the next person comes in and clocks in at 7:04, the shift will be pended because there's a 15-minute billing increment. There's several things there that people needed this to be explained to them, because our prior FIs, if there was like an overlap into the 15-minute block, they would go back and fix it. And so we didn't know that. And there's plenty of people with missing shifts all over the place because they don't know about the 15-minute clocking in and out increment, especially when you're clocking in and out by phone or at the app. And then there's a lot of confusion with the telephone numbers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it clocks you out, sometimes it has you clocked in for multiple days. It says you can go back and fix it. But quite frankly, it doesn't seem like the app and the telephone are connected to their billing system. It seems like that's separated somehow.
Can you talk a little bit about the 15-minute increment? Because my understanding of the discussion on the chats is that PPL system is rounding up. So if the aide stays over the shift, the system rounds up and it makes it look like she stayed there even longer. And that longer amount of time is billed.
Yes,
It's
yes,
billed to the MLTC.
yes.
So that's a
So,
problem, obviously, because services were not provided. Let's say 45 minutes extra was being billed. So that's a fraud issue, right?
yes,
Everybody who's been in the system knows that. But then, secondly, there was a lot of concern among consumers that the 45 minutes that is being assigned to them for services that they never received, that 45 minutes would then be taken out in the following week from their services, actual
yes,
services that they're owed.
yes. I've noticed that. Specifically, let's talk about like when the week is changing from Saturday. Your timesheets are supposed to be handed in at
Mhm.
11:59, and I don't know. Sometimes it seems like their system, like for instance, I'll give you an example right now. One of my clients' other aides, there's 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, 2 hours from the end of the billing week, Saturday, specifically 10 p.m. to 12 p.m., and they haven't paid him yet.
Mhm.
And they keep calling him to ask him why, what's the problem, etc. But the problem is clearly on them because it says good to pay. It's been approved by the consumer. It was for the last 2 hours of the week on a Saturday night, and they paid him for the rest of the shift that he worked, midnight till the next day, but they didn't pay him for those 2 hours. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And so sometimes I've found that the shift that gets worked overnight from Saturday to Sunday, you might find it in your check for Saturday, the last day that you worked, and it'll say Sunday, but they've like included it as if it were part of the week previous. And but then they short you down the line because then you're not getting paid for Sunday in your next check. You were paid for it in your prior check. Does
Yes.
that sound correct? Because that's just something I've noticed. Now, for him specifically, they have these 2 hours lingering. And I don't know what the problem is. They've called multiple times about it. It says good to pay. The consumer authorized it, but they haven't paid out yet, and they haven't seemed to figure out the problem why.
Hmm. Yeah. Um,
Is the consumer still in charge of their scheduling?
Yes,
Is the
it's a
so the
pretty
program is working the way it has been, and there's no change because PPL has stepped in.
no, no, we're all in a set schedule. I mean, initially at first, we were scattered all over the place because people did end up quitting behind the whole not getting paid thing. And, we had specifically, we had an issue. So the authorization was supposed to, initially, when we received the authorization, I thought the authorization said from April 2025 to April 2026. Now, I don't know. I've heard people say they've seen things changed. And when I did go back and look, it did say the first to the 31st, but all for 2025. So anyway, when the end of April came, it wasn't the authorization supposed to be there until the 31st, I think it was. And but on the 27th, the authorization stopped working. And it was saying that there wasn't an authorization there. And so I called PPL and we talked to them. And of course, they said, oh, it falls back on the insurance company. So we called the insurance company and they said, oh, the authorization's there. It's good till the 31st, the 30th. I'm not sure. Sorry. And but the authorization was there, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, well, what about the new authorization for June? And she said, oh, well, it's already been sent over, the lady from the insurance company. And so this is in April. She's saying it's already been sent over. So they couldn't figure out why the authorization ended on April 27th. And the new authorization didn't start working until May 7th. So there was a whole 10-day period there that we weren't getting paid. Our pay was delayed. And the authorization just absolutely wasn't showing up, even though they said on both sides that it was there. And ultimately, when they did pay us, they ended up paying us for 2 weeks, and our checks were triple taxed. I swear they triple taxed us because the amount in total that I received in gross was $3,000, but after tax it was $2,000.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they ran, it might have bumped you to another
A different
tax
tax
bracket.
bracket.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
right. I mean, I would guess that you might get that money back at the, end of the year, but hey, we have bills now, not
Right, right.
right.
Exactly. And it did it to everybody. So it didn't just happen to me. And now other people feel like they were shorted because they got put into a different tax bracket. You know what I mean? And I mean, like, I go to work, I do my job and plus. So I shouldn't have a problem about getting my pay. And specifically, I tried to merge the call so that PPL and I and the insurance company were on the same line so we could try to figure it out together. And PPL absolutely refused to talk to the insurance company. And I don't understand how that works, being that it's the insurance company that's paying you, PPL, for these services.
Jo so do you have any sense of who you're speaking with when you call so-called
Oh,
PPL? Do you
oh
know if you're
no,
speaking with
it's a
PPL or subcontractor?
well, it's varied actually. Um, I don't know if you want me to speak about this, but I had someone from PPL contact me and
Okay.
say they were a disgruntled employee. And
Mm.
they said that they were fired by PPL and they were outsourced. They actually lived in Florida.
Oh,
And she gave me all of the sign-in information that she would use to log into PPL
oh
to
my
do her
gosh.
job every day. Yes, I didn't log in. I'm not that goofy. I didn't, you know, data breaches and whatever. But she definitely gave me her login, her password, and told me to go in and look at the messages between her and the bosses and how they were doing business, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I ended up passing this lady off to a different attorney who was like a whistleblower.
Hmm. So what did you see when you went in there?
I didn't go in there. I didn't go in there because again, I'm not a PPL rep. I don't
Yep.
know what kind of security measures they take, you know what I mean? And
Okay.
then I would be logging in from my IP address where I also log in to clock in and stuff, you know what I mean? I totally did not even attempt to try.
Okay.
But I
Um,
do have the information if anybody wants to reach out to me and
I
take it upon
think,
themselves to go
yeah.
look.
No, I think that's a good call for not going in and yeah, please don't call for the info unless you're a reporter, maybe,
Right, right, right.
or a whistleblower.
Right, right. So I did pass her off to
Yeah,
someone else. So,
yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, like, what kind of situation is that? Like, it could potentially have clients' information, people's social security numbers. Who knows? You know what I mean? And that's a complete HIPAA violation. And it just further goes to say that PPL does not do their due diligence when it comes to hiring people because and this lady told me that there wasn't like a background check, and she's definitely got access to my personal information and could go open up an account in my name if she wanted to. I mean, that's my thoughts with it.
hmm. Um, well, it's amazing the information that comes to you, but you've definitely put yourself out there. I don't think it's any secret that you are the named plaintiff in the class action lawsuit that my firm commenced against PPL for wage and hour violations. And that was certainly when it initially was filed. that definitely put a spotlight on me and my firm and the type of work that I do. And I'm sure that a lot of people reached out to you with questions, comments, feedback.
All
So,
of that, yes. Yes, I try to help as many people as I can. It's actually all these groups that I'm aligned with. I actually was signed up with them well before the transition even took place
mhm,
because, again, there wasn't any guidance really given to how this thing was supposed to work.
mhm,
And, without being aligned with these groups, we would have been clueless. You know what I mean? Because I can take you back to the very first day that I was on the phone with PPL. And, when I hung up the phone, my client and I, when we hung up the phone that day, the guy basically said, "Oh, you're all set, and you don't have to worry about anything else, and you're ready to go for the first." But in fact, that wasn't even true because we had to upload IDs and certain documents, and you know what I mean. And
mhm,
and then there was like months, I guess, probably from February 4th or the 5th. That's when we started signing up with them. From then on, like it was tooth and nails, just trying to figure out what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, how it was going to happen. Is there going to be any guidance? There was lots of misinformation in the beginning. Initially, they said that somebody could come to my consumer's house and sign him up and explain the changes that were going to be happening. And then when I tried to set that up for him, they were like, "Oh no, we don't come to your house. Everything happens over the phone." And, I asked very specific questions in the beginning, like the rate of pay, which they said was going to be competitive, and it's not competitive. It's the same rate of pay that it was before they transitioned over. They said it was going to be all these great benefits and such, and turns out that that's not true either. The company that they're aligned with, Leading Edge, has a history of fraudulent activity, and the prior owner was in jail for fraud, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a whole bunch of misinformation. They were telling people initially in the beginning that there was a message put out actually on the Department of Health's website, and they were telling people, "Oh, the number that you're calling to sign up with PPL is a fraud number, and you shouldn't call that number anymore, and you should call this other number." And then it turns out that the number that they were telling us to call now was the actual fraud number. So they themselves were putting out misinformation, and they expected to have everybody signed up by March 28th, I believe it was. But
mhm,
how could you have that type of expectation when you weren't even giving people the proper guidance or information that they needed to complete the transition,
mhm.
and I don't know, just I'm an observer, and I'm from the sideline, and I seen like all the trouble and questions and misinformation, and just people did not have a clue. And so I decided to jump in and try to help as many people as I could.
What do you think is the biggest issue today as we're talking about PPL and the transition? What's like the number one problem that you hear your colleagues dealing with as well as you?
There's a lot of questions regarding the benefits. That's a
Okay.
major thing that affects everybody's daily life.
Mhm.
If you're used to a certain type of insurance, and then it seems like people are being forced in certain areas to take this insurance that they're offering, or being cut off of an insurance that was provided to them by New York State because they work for PPL. Now they have to take this insurance, and the insurance is crap. It doesn't offer anything. Like you'll probably die using that insurance. So that's a major issue for people. And there's people that don't know how to navigate through the benefits. And I can tell you specifically, I'm upstate New York, right? I get messages all the time regarding the wage parity, and I'm not even part of wage parity. They're sending me messages saying I have an account for a flex card that I need to sign up with. I don't live there. I don't get a flex card in Rochester, New York. So, you know, a lot of the information that they're spreading is misinformation. So I would say communication would be another major thing that this company needs to work on, because there is very bad communication, and they don't have their reps are not informed enough to even give you the proper information, you know. I
So,
have
oh,
I want to say that I have found in my PPL journey that if you call the Spanish line, you will probably get a supervisor or someone that seems like a supervisor. They kind of seem to have it together on the Spanish line, but any other number that you're calling, they're kind of clueless.
that's interesting. That's
Like
very interesting.
I've spoken with several people on the Spanish line. A lady named Celebration. I've spoken with a lady named Anne Marie twice. She's even called back and, um, double checked on me like a week later to make sure that everything was going okay. But that only came from the Spanish line. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Now, I I've tried to call back and ask for those specific people, and I haven't been able to reach them.
Hmm.
Are they bilingual on the Spanish line?
No, they seem pretty English to me. It's,
Okay. 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 Okay.
I don't hear like an accent or a different type of dialect or anything like that.
Hmm.
Maybe they're AI Google translating on the Spanish.
Well, I don't know because I listen pretty closely and they sound human. They do.
Okay.
So, how does this compare to your prior experience before the PPL transition? And again, without naming any other FIs that you may have worked with, how does it compare overall as a process from your own experience and what
It was horrible. It was horrible. It was a complete failure. They really dropped the ball. They
this
really
was a
did.
failure? But how did
Yes.
you were you overall happy with the service and the
I wish we
process
could go back.
before? Okay,
I try to keep in contact with my prior agency, just, to make
just
sure
in
that,
case,
huh?
just in case.
Just in case, you know what I mean? Like when I tell you about the 15-minute billing increment, that came from my prior FI. I
Hmm.
only know that because of my prior FI.
Because they were
And
so ethical.
exactly. And even after the fact, like, the prior FI did try to help us.
Hmm.
They said, hey, you don't have to stay with this PPL situation. You can go to a PCA program. And that is an option for people, I suppose. But I don't know. Truthfully, I kind of feel like it's a trap. I don't know. Truthfully, I feel like it's a trap. Um, Going to PCA service for my client specifically, it doesn't really work for him. He's 24-hour care. You know, when we were looking at the PCA option, something that came up was, oh, well, if you have to go to a doctor's appointment with him, or if he has a doctor's appointment, you're not allowed to be on the clock with him while he's at the doctor's appointment. So that kind of
Wait,
doesn't.
so who said that to you?
We were trying to sign up with a PCA service. We were weighing out our options, maybe leaving CDPEP altogether and going to a PCA service. And
Okay,
so that company, I don't want to put them out there like that.
sure.
That company said, oh, well, say your client has a doctor's appointment. Well, while he's at his doctor's appointment, you would have to clock out. So, and I'm at the doctor's appointment with him. So, why would I have to clock out? That's the whole purpose of me being there. He's not supposed to be by himself,
Hmm.
right? So, that's not consistent with his need. He needs to have somebody there, and that person can't always be me, and they're going to want to get paid for being there. You know what I mean? So, it's not really consistent with his need, and that's why the CDPAP is more suitable for him, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's more flexible, definitely on the CPAP
It's just a
side.
different set of rules,
Yeah.
PCA. They have their own set of rules per New York State. The same guidance is not there for CDPAP. It's more flexible for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you would definitely need authorizations and things like that. There are ways to extend. I mean, I would hope that the
Yeah, well,
agencies would know know the
they
ways to
didn't
do
seem
that.
to they didn't seem to offer that. And then another thing is that I didn't like about switching to the PCA idea was in my past when I was way younger, I'm certified as an HHA. And this company that we were going to sign up with had a quick, easy 1 day solution to get us all certified for PCA service. And that required like a certification. But in my experience, certification is like a 2 week class. They don't just throw you in like that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It just didn't seem like a good idea. And we opted not to go that way. And plus, we went through all the trials and trauma with signing up for PPL. And so I just didn't want to give up so quickly. I'm trying to let it pan itself out. Maybe, hopefully, one day they'll get it together entirely and we won't have to go back and forth regularly with them on the phone.
You seem obviously pretty active and as an advocate and just volunteering yourself to help everybody else in the program. I don't know how much you're following on the political side with Rivera's conference,
Oh,
having press conferences and whatever else is coming out of the legislature.
I
Or
love
do you?
Rivera. I love
Okay.
Senator Rivera. I message him often. He does a great job of expressing what needs to be said.
So you're hopeful that something may come of the advocacy that you're doing and also from the responses that you're hearing from the legislature that there's a possibility of something.
I mean, I'm hopeful, but in the climate of everything, my outlook is pretty grim. I don't know. It doesn't, I mean, like I said, if I want to be honest, I feel like they sent PPL in to destroy this program from within because they knew that they just couldn't just close it down, you know? And because that's what it seems like in every other state that PPL has been in. It's just a disarray now, and they're in a worse crisis than what they were before PPL came along. And it kind of seems like that's what the objective was here, to send this company in, frustrate as many people as they could, see how many people they could get to quit or drop out or go to PCA service or, go just a different route from CDPAP. And, so they don't have to pay and provide for these services. I am aware that the program is a booming program. But what do they expect? People are not getting younger. My client is not going to be cured from his MS. What do they expect? And this is a more cost effective and humane way of taking care of people, and they should be in their home, not forced into institutions or have to be with people that they don't even know to take care of them.
Very good. Is there anything else, Johnny, we should know about this whole issue? Something that you haven't mentioned. I understand that you're a huge advocate and you wish that New York State could go back to what it was, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that New York State will actually do that. So, in the absence of reverting to how it was in the past, um, if you could just do a quick elevator pitch, if PPO was listening, what do you want them to know?
I would let them know that the employees that are taking care of these people matter. They don't deserve to be short paid or underpaid or have their wages disappear, their shifts disappear. These are things that are actually happening. This directly affects the people that are in this program that are receiving these services. When their aides aren't being paid properly, then they don't get the proper services that they need. There are people that have gone without services, have that are continuing to go without services because of the guidance and the misinformation and the misrepresentation of who PPL is and what their specific duty is. A lot of people relied on their former FIs. It's my experience that people that are sick, they, don't have all the time and attention to check the portal every day at the end of somebody's shift to make sure that their aides are being paid. Um, you know, I think that I've always thought that there needs to be a more direct, hands on approach when it comes to dealing with people that have disabilities. A lot of people just seem to be left in the dark, and I don't understand how they think that this is humane or even compliant with the laws of New York State.
Thank you, Johnny. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and just putting yourself out there as a voice, as an advocate of this program, of the patients, consumers, and the personal assistants. Thank you so much, and
Thank you
we
so much.
appreciate you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us, Johnny.
Thank you. Thank you again.
This has been the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha, Guillaume, and Emina Poricanin. Special guest, Johnny Flanagan. Have a good one.